Welcome back to another episode of Living with Audacity. As always, I hope you're all doing amazing. Um, as I continue to prepare and think about what are the things that I want to share during this podcast, you need to know that I show up in this space fully committed and really wanting to create just content and information and share inspiring information that when you're finished watching this podcast, you think to yourself, you know what? I might have not realized how great I was, but because of the things that Aisha has shared, because of the energy that I hope I bring every single episode, that you realize, and again, I'm going to start doing a test to talk about what is the mantra, right? That no one is responsible for cueing you into your greatness. But as we continue to step into what it means to live with audacity, every episode, I'm really going to just share, as I said, some little tidbits, some tips and tricks on how we start to move into our audacious life and what does that look like. So today's episode of Living with Audacity is going to be focused on bold beginnings, right? How do we actually start our journey towards becoming audacious? Because as I said, this takes a lot of work, right? Many of us have gone through ups and downs. I certainly have, continue to do so. But the truth is, we need to start somewhere. And one of the things in my own journey that I've realized is the start sometimes is the hardest part of really living this audacious life. And so, really, every bold journey, I would say, begins with that single step. And really, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about what does that single step look like and how do we, from the last episode, right, we talked about that mindset. How do we combat that mindset that says we're not ready? It's not time. There's still a few more things that I need to do. But at the end of the day, there really does have to be a way that we start. So today's episode is all about what does it mean to start from a bold beginning as we enter into a space of living with audacity. And one of the first things I want to talk about is that power of momentum. And what I mean by that is like, what are those small actions, right? So many times when we think about the things that we want to achieve, and again, I am certainly guilty of this. Remember what I said in these episodes. I'm not just speaking from the perspective of theory. I'm talking from the perspective of someone who has tried, failed, tried again, and succeeded. Right. But when we think about that process of momentum, many times when we think about what it is that we desire in our life, we always focus on that end game. So living audaciously means this is what it's going to look like. This is what it's going to feel like. This is the ultimate outcome. But the truth is, those small steps, that first moment that you decide to say, it's time or I'm ready, really is the first step in moving into an audacious life. Because we know that taking that first step is where we become energized. It's where we begin to understand where we have capacity. Are we ultimately moving in the direction that we want to? And again, this is part of that rocky journey. Remember, our desires do not happen linear. If anything, it's what's happening outside of those, I'll say that beautiful box, right? I always say it's kind of like a 3-year-old that's trying to stay in the line, right? Staying in our comfort zone actually doesn't allow us to determine where our strengths and our power is. So really taking those small action steps, building that momentum, experiencing the change that happens, even if it's minor, is where we start to move into this path of living audaciously, right? Making the commitment to just start might seem minor, but I'm going to tell you, for those of you who are watching this podcast, and you're sitting thinking, okay, if I just start, if I just make a small change, if I just put my big toe into what I feel is like a big pond, I need you to understand that that is actually a step toward living audaciously, and that we really need to give ourselves grace and honor our commitment to even wanting to move forward. Here's another one that is that I have experienced, and it's this myth about being ready. Okay, I'll be honest, if I thought that I was ready in every circumstance, I think perfection would happen, but it doesn't exist. We need to be aware of the fact that being ready doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. If anything, being ready means that we are ready to embrace what we are about to experience, what we're about to do, what we're about to try, what we're about to fail at, and what we're about to rebuild. Being committed to just being ready in and of itself, again, is another step in living that audacious life. And ready doesn't mean that we have it figured out. If anything, we probably don't. I can think about, again, when I started my business almost 6 years ago, I thought to myself, okay, well, I'm not ready to start a business. How? Like, I've never done anything related to business. I don't have a business degree, like all the things. I don't have a business degree, never started a business, never tried to run a business. How could I absolutely be prepared or ready to start a business? And the truth is, at this point, am I a little bit more ready? Absolutely. Am I fully ready? No. But what I am ready for is to continue this journey of excelling. What I'm ready for is to unpack and uncover all the great things that I continue to learn about myself in this journey. What I'm ready for is for the continued achievements and blessings that happen for me as I embark on this journey of growth and entrepreneurship. So being mindful around this concept of ready doesn't mean that you have everything figured out. If anything, you don't. But again, what you're ready for is to experience the change, to experience the trials and the tribulations, but also the opportunities and the blessings that are going to come from now taking this first step into living your audacious life, right? Another big one is this concept of fear versus intuition. So one of the things that I have learned myself is to trust my intuition. I believe that I will not fail myself. Not to say that this has always been the thought that I had, because again, doubt used to play very heavily in my mind, which is what kept me in my comfort zone. But as I moved into a place of living with audacity, I realized, Aisha, you're not going to fail yourself. You might not make always the right decisions, again, based on the circumstances, based on what's happening around me. But my gut has rarely, actually, I'm not even going to say rarely, my gut actually hasn't failed me. But part of this, again, is recognizing where fear can supersede. Fear exists. And I think fear, if anything, is a beautiful thing. I know, society says like, ooh, fear is what stops us. It does, but it also gives us an opportunity to pause, to reflect, and really deeply think about, again, that intuition, that gut feeling that's saying, no, this is the right path. This, in fact, is the direction that you need to go in. This is, in fact, where you need to put your energy, your time, your space, your brilliance, so that, again, you can continue to live audaciously. Right? Nothing about living with audacity comes, as I said, with ease. You're going to hear me say this over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? Living with audacity is not linear. Living with audacity is not perfection. Living with audacity also doesn't mean that you've completely figured everything out. If anything, living with audacity means that you are fully in, that you are fully immersed for the highs, the lows, things going left, things going right, things coming up, things going down. But staying committed to, again, what your end game is, what your end goal is, right? And again, today's episode is about those bold beginnings. Like, what is it that you're looking to do? Is it a business that you want to start? Is it a job that you want to switch? Is it, maybe a relationship that you want to let go of, a friendship, an intimate relationship? Is it a position that you want to, again, as I said, go for? What bold beginning? What is it that you desire for your life? And what is the small, incremental, bold step that you're going to commit to today? So the last episode I had an ask, I had a challenge. And again, I hope you fill it. I hope you fulfill it. But I'm going to ask another question. I'm going to ask you again, for those who watch this episode, and I know everybody's going to be watching this episode, I want you, whether it's in my DMs, whether it is on my Instagram at meetomoa.health, I want you to tell me in the next 72 hours, what is the bold beginning that you're going to start? And again, it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be, Aisha, I've registered to do my master's. It could be, Aisha, I decided to finally, start that podcast, or I decided to finally start creating that book. Listen, let me tell you about me and this podcast. I had this thought about starting this podcast for 2 years. 2 years I sat and mulled and created this podcast. And every single time I thought, okay, I'm going to start it, I was like, no, I'm not ready to start a podcast. I don't have the time. I can't do it. I've never podcasted before. What am I going to look like on camera? What am I really going to there's not enough time on this podcast for me to run through all the things that I told myself about what I couldn't do related to this podcast. And then I happened to meet this wonderful woman whose studio I am doing this podcast in by chance at a Boss Babe brunch, connected to another woman who I had a privilege of meeting. And here I am 2 years later doing this podcast. And I say that because I took a bold step. I didn't know what I'm doing. I still don't really ultimately know what I'm doing, but thank God, you surround yourself with powerful women and people who know what they're doing and they make you look good on camera. But I say that because my commitment to just living with audacity meant that I had to take a step forward, that I had to stop thinking about all the reasons why I wasn't ready. And that bold action, that simple bold action was to send a text message or to send actually a message out in a Facebook group to say, hey, does anybody know anyone who knows a studio or a local studio that I could connect with? And lo and behold, I would reconnect with the owner of Perspective Studio Productions, who I met at that same lunch that I went to. Nothing happens by accident. Everything happens by design. But simply making that one bold step is where I am today. Again, right? If I had sat in that same mindset mantra that I had for 2 years, I wouldn't be on another episode. I wouldn't have launched Living with Audacity and my other podcast with my best friend, Bestie Spillin' Tea from Time. Just making the commitment to try is sometimes the greatest gift, is that main step in living with audacity, right? So think about that. Don't be so focused on, again, these big outcomes and making sure that the change or the step that you take is huge and and pivotal. Sometimes just making that commitment, making that text message, sending out that message, asking for help is that step towards living with audacity. Another big one, which is kind of tied to like fear, which is tied to, again, this concept of readiness, is that analysis by paralysis, right? So where we overthink all the things like, am I camera ready? Is it going to look good? Am I going to look pretty? Am I going to have content to share? Am I going to have enough things to say in the 30, 40 minutes, whatever that looks like that I need to do? We can overanalyze literally everything. And as someone who by trade is actually a senior policy analyst, you want to talk about analysis by paralysis? I could go through all the things. I could give you the data. I could give you the strategies as to why things can't happen. But if I stay in that space, then the truth is I'm overthinking my dreams, right? Dreams, what's the power of dreams? The power of dreams is that all things are possible. When we move into a space of analysis, right? And again, I'm not saying just jump into things. Like, please make sure that you think about what you're doing, right? I don't want anybody to be like, oh, I saw this podcast and I just said, just jump into it. Don't think about anything. That's absolutely not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is be mindful around how this analysis becomes excuses, becomes additional barriers and challenges and reasons why you're not ready, right? We have to be mindful around how we can get stuck in the concept of endless research. Like, I need to make sure I research the topics. I need to make sure that I'm planning accordingly, that I can have everything timed. I mean, if we had that level of control just in life, none of us would make mistakes, right? But that's not how life happens. So yes, plan. Make sure you're prepared. Make sure you know that what you're seeking to do is what you want to do, but be very mindful around how you are over-analyzing, researching, and planning, where again, it is covering the concept of actually staying status quo, of not taking that bold step, of not doing what you're supposed to do, right? Taking that small action that is going to lead to significant and impactful change. And another thing that I thought was really, that I've always thought about was even shifting the mindset. So language has power, right? The things we say out loud about ourselves, the things that we say in our head can also operate as huge barriers. So often, right, or in the past, I should say, I used to say, like, what if something goes wrong? Like, what am I going to do? If something goes wrong, what am I going to do? And someone said to me, well, Aisha, you really need to stop thinking about what if something goes wrong and think about what happens when it goes right. How am I going to feel when things really go in the direction that I want them to do? That's the language that I need to have. That's the language that you need to have. Nothing is preventable, right? We can plan, we can prepare, but let's be honest, life is lifing, and there's only so much that we can plan. But what if it works? What if we change the mindset from what if it goes wrong to what if it works when it works, right? If we operate with that mindset of what happens when it works, then the momentum and the desire to continue trying is naturally built. Because I've tried something, it worked. Okay, that means I got to try something else because I know it's going to work. Right? Being mindful of what it is that we tell ourselves about the things that we're seeking to do has a direct connection to achieving the things that we want to do. Again, doesn't mean that things aren't going to go wrong. Doesn't mean that we're going to, not experience challenges and obstacles. But if we operate with a mindset that says when it works and what if it works, then again, only positive things can come out of that. Another big one